are here. So I would like to welcome both Dr. Nadia Ghanem and Mrs. Nadia Shahat, and both are part of the session entitled Algerian Literature in Translation. So we start with Dr. Nadia Ghanem.
Thank you.
Are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much.
Yes. So Nadia Ghanem Dr. Nadia Ranim is British Academy postdoctoral fellow, and she is currently affiliated to SOAS. She is also editor in Arablit.org. Actually, I came to know her through her work, through her amazing work. I hope that she will take time to speak a little bit about it. So the floor is yours, Dr. Ranim, and welcome again.
That's very kind. Thank you very much for the invitation and for allowing me to talk to you about a list I compiled over a few years of works of fiction written by Algerian writers or directly written in the English language, so translated to English or written in English. And it's a list that I published in 2018 on Arablit.org that you were talking about just now, Dr. Hamdi. And so it's a list I've continued updating, and I'm going to I don't have I'm going to send it to you via the messages, but when I've stopped sharing my screen. So there are a few more books. I've tried to follow what was being published until the present day. And I have to apologize to anybody who's here and who's not on the list. I did not pick up on the poems of Professor Ghafaiti, so Asmahli, I'm very sorry. There will be a wonderful addition to this list, and it's a list that I would like to be a collective work. So when I send you the link to my blog, so the updated list is there, feel free to send me messages, to leave messages so that we can improve this together, because it's not exhaustive. These are the books I found on my own research. And I should say that it's a list made by a reader. I'm a scholar, I'm an academic, but I do not work in the field of literature or North African literature or Middle East and North African literature. It's just a list that I started to compile for myself because I wanted to share readings with friends who could just read in the English language. And personally, after a while, I also wanted to keep a track of how us as Algerians are received in terms of how our intellectual production is received. And for me, it became very important as well to, to just compile this. It became a very addictive type of exercise, also to show that once I decided to publish it, that Algeria in the English-speaking world is known as a country that produces petrol, and I wanted to show that Algeria also produces beauty. I published the list in 2018, and as I was trying to figure out what to put on that list, I had two very basic questions: is what is Algerian literature? And when does Algerian literature begin? If I wanted, to put it in writing and start having a bullet point list. And I found that the first question is just very difficult. It's a fascinating thing to think about. And I think we all know what we mean when we talk about it. But it's not something I'll go into now because I will take the whole length of the session, but I would really benefit from your thoughts on it, on how to define this body of literature. So the couple of criteria I selected just for myself were that I would only list works of fiction. So it's not something that I didn't want to list non-fiction, because there's a lot of that, of course. And I also wanted to list whole works and not excerpts. There are a lot of single poems or single short stories that are floating, especially on the net, but it would have become too difficult to list everyone. So it would be whole works, and then also it would be contemporary literature as well. And I define that in a very basic way as the length of a human lifespan. So no more than, I don't know, 100, 120 years in terms of how far to go back to. But that's, of course, notwithstanding the fact that Algerian literature goes back quite far, if we start, listing it. There's Apuleius that Professor Gafete was just mentioning, the Metamorphoses by Apuleius, and there's also a wonderful anthology of poems published in the 11th and 12th century by writers who were born in Algeria, and it's an anthology called Poems of the Millennium, and it was translated and put together by Pierre Joris and Habib Tengour, the Algerian poet. And I have the book, so if you don't have it, I have it in PDF, and I'll send it to you as well over the messages when I finish screen sharing. So of course, these three criteria I adopted, I broke, as we do with rules when we set them, and you'll see some of the exceptions I made in the list. And so I'll take you on a tour of what I found through this presentation. Now, you'll see that the date to the left is the year of publication of the translation, and then the year to the right in brackets is the year of the original publication. So I apologize to those who are following this on small screens or on phones. I hope you can see some of this. But I've put the slides also on my blog, so you can consult them later on as well, and use them as well, however you want. So the first novel I found translated to the English language is The Sleep of the Just by Mouloud Maamri in 1956. And it was originally published in 1955, which is a really quick turnaround for a translation. It's just a year and in between the original publication and the translation, and it was quickly followed 2 years later by Assia Jabbar's novel The Mischief, which was also published under the title Nadia by in the US, the name of the main character in the book. And that's also a very quick turnaround for a translation. It was published in 1958, and then when it was originally published in 1957. And it's not too, so I didn't find anything before these years, except going back to, the 11th or 12th or 13th century. And it's very interesting that these are the years and the books that appear in the 50s, because that's, of course, when the War of Independence had fully launched. And that's probably also as a result of the reception of what was happening in Algeria that probably the Anglo-English, English-speaking world did not know about, and was just learning about and became interested, I think, in the literary production and intellectual production of the country. And then strangely, I found nothing for the 70s and the 80s. So if anyone has knows of translations made in that period, I'd be very interested to know, because that's 20 years where I haven't been able to find a title. And then the next decade for which I found translation is the 1980s, with established writers like Mohammed Deeb, who start appearing in translation. And very interestingly, that's also when we start seeing what we could perhaps term as classics, because his book originally had been published in 1962, and so publishing the translation in 85 seems to show that interested publishers were starting to have a look at who was well established and who was a famous writer or a writer of note. But there are also they also start appearing young voices like Fatuma Tuwati, and then there's Mehdi Sharif as well here, Tia Naharim. His novel was also made into a movie in 85. So I think maybe that's what spurred on, that got into the translation, that supported the translation. And there we have mostly novels, as you can see here, but there's also memoirs that start appearing with Fatma Amrouche, for example. So sorry, that's going. So that's 6 books there. And then for the decade that follows, there are substantially more books. So it's 11 books, and that's almost double from the previous decade, with more Asiat Jebbar, and also what we could term classics that start appearing, for example, Katib Yassin's Najma, which gets published first in 91, when it was originally published in 56, and voices like Rashid Boujadra, who starts appearing as well, and new voices or younger voices with Nina Bouraoui, for example. Now, what you're going to see, what you'll see in the list, is that the great majority of the titles are translated from the French language. The Arabic language is practically, well, not present in the translation. There are very few titles from the Arabic. And the earliest one I found is in this collection of essays called In the House of Silence, where there is an essay by Azhour Wanisi, who talks about why and how she became a writer, and that was originally written in the Arabic. So that's the books for this decade, and then you'll see it substantially increases from 2000 to 2009 to full 37 books. I just saw that Professor Gafeti's collection of poetry were published in 2006 and 2018, so that belongs to this decade, and that bumps up the number of books translated. But you see, as time progresses, there are more translations coming in, but again, vastly from the French language. So I put in brackets, I'm not sure if you can see in squares, the books that were translated from a different language than the French. There's The Earthquake by Tahar Watar, which appears in 2000, originally published in 74. And then I also included a special issue by the literary magazine based in the UK called Banipa. They produced a special issue for Algerian literature in 2000, and that includes several excerpts of novels or short stories or even poems by Algerian writers who do write in Arabic. And then in terms of different languages, it's the first translation of a poetry collection written in Kabyle, so representing at least we have a representative of the Tamazight languages, was done in 2007. It's the poetry collection of Ahsen Marish, and he was telling me that these collections were translated by friends of his who are bilingual. So it's thanks to friends as well that his poetry has crossed over to the English language. And then there is translation from the Italian into the English language by, of course, the work of Amar Al-Akhous is being translated from the Italian. And so far, the only translations from the Italian to the English are all the books by Amr al-Akhous. So I'm sure there must be, well, I hope there are other writers who write in Italian and get translated, but these did not come across my radar. Now, there are some books that started to be written as well in that decade directly in the English language, and that there's I don't know if you've read Donkey Heart, Monkey Mind by Jafar Chetouane, which was initially written in the English language, I'm told. So the next decade, coming closer to the present day now, 2010 to 2019, you see a whopping 46 books. That's not bad. And again, mostly translated from the French, but with a few more works from the Arabic, starting thanks to Houda Hamdi's books, basically, and her trilogy. The first novel of her trilogy actually appeared in translation in 2003, but you probably know that a second translation was made ordered by Bloomsbury Books, who then used the same translator to translate the other 3 novels, and these were published in that decade. And the original translation, the first translation in 2003, is difficult to find. So I've put it in that decade, but the work of Houda Hamdi is really are really the books that bump up that number for the representation of Arabic translation, well, of the Algerian writers who write in Arabic who are translated to the English language. And then this is the anthology of poems I was telling you about by Habib Tengour and Pierre Joris. It goes against my rule of not only included whole works, but it's such an important publication, and it's for the whole of North Africa. So there's also Libya and Tunisia. It's a very interesting work as well. So I couldn't not list it. And then again in that decade we have the earliest, at least I think that's the first novel by Wassim El-Arij, who writes so much, who's translated in French consistently, but he won the Qatara Prize in 2015, and as a result, some prizes promote or support the translation of the work. And the book was translated in 2016, but I have not seen the book anywhere. I've seen a photo of the book, and that's this photo, which was put on sale in a secondhand bookshop, but I think it has had a very limited distribution, and I've no information on who the translator was even. So there is a translation, but again, you know, how much does it gets distributed and comes out as well to readers is an important issue to track. And then there are a couple of more books there by with the collections of Ahsen Marish's poetry, and one more of Amr al-Akhous's novels translated from the Italian in 2016. So at the moment, since 2020, there have been 5 books translated by Algerian writers in the English language. There are 2 collections of poetry. So there's the brilliant poetry collection by Samira Negrouche, which was translated and published in 2020. And then there's also a collection of poems by Anna Grecki, which appeared last year as well, and the rest of our novels. And you'll see, as you have time to maybe look through the list more closely, the great majority of the works being translated are novels. There are very few short stories, there are even fewer poetry collections, and I've only found one play by Hélène Sixou, and yes, it's just the focus is on the classic novel, and that's also well, an interesting feature or focus of translated works. And then there are three more novels that have been announced that are not published yet. There's Jamila Morani's brilliant Tufah al-Jinn, which is a novella. It's really fun, and it's going to come out at the end of 2021 this year. And then there's going to finally be a translation of Rabia Jalti's work. The date of publication hasn't been announced yet, but I know the publisher, Tara Press, and they really are working on it. So it's forthcoming. And then you'll have heard that Ahmed Taibawi won the Naguib Mahfouz Prize, and as a result of that, he's going to also be translated by Hopo Press in the very close future, I hope. So just to give an overview of the results of this, so I've found so far, in this list you'll find 110 works of fiction, which sounds great, but it's 110 works over 67 years. That's a little, that's not even 2 books per year in translation. And then there are 4 languages translated, so 87 from the French, 12 from the Arabic only, 3 from the Kabyle, but that represents only 1 writer, and then 4 from the Italian, again, that represents only 1 writer. And then the great majority of the books that are being translated have been written by men. So there's a huge focus on the production of male writers, which is very amusing, because we owe these translations to all of the translators who've worked on these texts, and the majority of these translators are women. There are 87.5 translators for all of these books. So often translators have worked in pairs. They have not worked, you don't find a single translator always for 1 book. They do work as a duo. Sometimes up to 4 people work on a translation. And so the total I found is 45 women for 34 men, which is an interesting balance as well. And then the publishers are quite varied as well. There are university presses and as well as commercial publishers. And we owe the translation of Malika Muqaddam's work, for example, or Leila Sebar, to university presses who have supported the translation of feminist writing. So that's how their works have come across to the English language as well. So I'll leave you with a few names. So I've listed the names you'll see for both the translators and the writers. And I'm going to stop sharing now and send you that list here. And then if you have a look, you'll see the slides, you'll see the list. And as I say, please feel free to use this information. It's not mine. You can use it for your own studies. I think the statistics might be of interest to somebody who's looking at this entry of our production into the English-speaking world. And I think that it's, although we can't control how we are received or perceived, I think it's really important for us to know what's happening, know who is being selected to be translated. I've not looked at the themes of the books that have been chosen. So some people might find that there's a preference for works that talk about the Algerian War of Independence, or works that prefer, I don't know, a whole world of other themes that I've personally not had time to track. But you're very welcome to use any of this information. And the slides are also, you can also download the slides in that blog post there. So that's it from me.